Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Nathan Fox, that's Ben Olson. With us is Professor Laurence Kotlikoff. He has told us to call him Larry, which still makes me uncomfortable. Ben and I are the founders of LSATdemon.com and our weekly podcast, Thinking LSAT. We have an email here from F, and the email says, hey guys, I take your advice very seriously and ask your opinion every time a semi-serious decision needs to be made. I have been offered $40,000 a year off of a BU law school tuition, which would equate to paying $19,000 per year, not including living expenses. Additionally, I was offered a full ride at Northeastern and Suffolk. I have not heard from BC. BU puts more people into big law while Northeastern and Suffolk do not. BU therefore has stronger starting salaries for new grads. How would you guys make a financial decision based on this information? Also, in a previous podcast, you guys mentioned how an economist or someone in a field related would truly crunch the numbers. How can I make an educated decision based on data points that will help me leave law school with minimal debt and a strong starting salary, assuming I did big law or something related to that starting salary? We have, Larry, you are an actual economist. I have your book in my hand. It's called Money Magic. You have a whole chapter that's called Don't Borrow for College. I am going to shut up and let you give some advice to our listener.
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you guys. Thanks so much for having me. These are tricky decisions. Suffolk is a great university, long tradition. Lots of great connections downtown with the law firms, very well respected. Northeastern has done dramatically improved as a university over the last 40 years. So, what you need to look at is what is the differential in expected pay that I could get over my lifetime from going to BU. It could be that the starting salary so the first job might pay an extra 10 or 20 or 30,000, but where I go from there is going to be very similar, whether I'm coming from Suffolk or coming from Northeastern. And I don't know how important it is to law firms that you're coming from a more prestigious law firm. There's no question that BU has one of the top law faculties in the country, and that may matter. Even 20 years from now, that you can say that you have a degree from that, a law firm that you might want to move to in Minneapolis might pay BU grads or be more interested in BU grads than Suffolk grads. That's the kind of thing that you could pick up the phone and call some law firm in Minneapolis, a top law firm, and say, everything else equal, if I was calling you and moving to Minneapolis in 20 years and I've done well, and I had a BU degree versus a Northeastern or Suffolk, would it affect your interest in hiring me? If they say no, you very quickly, and a few other firms say no, then there's not a big differential that far out. So you want to really try and get a handle on what's the pay differential, and then you want to add up the cost differential and just compare them, do a cost benefit analysis. The borrowing rates are very high compared to the lending rates on these student loans, and then especially for graduate student loans, which we're talking about here, the rates are high, and then you can't get out of them if you go bankrupt. You can't discharge them easily in bankruptcy. You're stuck with these loans till the end of your days. So if it's a matter of, not just paying for your room and board and the extra tuition, but also borrowing or having your parents borrow and even at an even higher rate, and maybe taking it out of your inheritance as a result, the real cost. So you have to add up all these costs and then compare it to the gain and see what it looks like. You can't really eat prestige. If you're going to BU to meet your spouse, to the BU law school, if that's what you have in mind here, and you can afford it, it might be much better than Tinder or Match.com is a place, maybe you'll find a better spouse at BU than at Suffolk. But otherwise, if it's talking about education, how much is that going to matter to your actual income? That the BU faculty have published more in top law journals than the Suffolk faculty.
Without calling those firms and doing that due diligence, what's your gut reaction? Is it any just save the money and go to Suffolk, or do you think
my gut reaction is it's going to be so how much would the grant was like 40,000 at BU, right? The tuition is probably
he netted it out to 19. It's going to cost 19,000 a year in tuition. He'll have to actually pay 19,000 versus zero at Northeastern, zero at Suffolk.
So we're talking about 60,000 over 3 years. It's not the end of the world to go to BU, because he should be able to, have a high enough salary to pay that back. So I would really, maybe visit the 3 places and talk to faculty and talk to the students and see what their experience has been, and then try and find out where people have gotten hired. If half the class at Northeastern hasn't gotten a job from last year, whereas everybody at BU did, that's going to make a big difference in the calculation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he needs to look not only at, average salary, right? Because just looking at mean starting salary doesn't tell us that much. We need to really look at what are the odds of getting a big law job, which is one of those high dollar jobs. It's not like the number is 0 at Northeastern or Suffolk, and it's not like the number is 100 at BU. So he needs to discount somehow that starting salary by what are my odds of actually getting one of those jobs?
Yeah, you have to multiply the probability of that salary differential from going to BU times the probability of that happening, and that's the expected gain versus the cost for sure, the extra 60,000. But then the cost could actually be higher than 60,000, because the interest rate, it may be he borrows 60,000 and it's accumulating interest along the way. So by the time he graduates, and then he might have some college debt, so it may take him a long time to repay this. Meanwhile, he's paying 6% nominal when, if the inflation rate is really 2%, that's 4% real. That's a big high number, because right now you can invest for sure safely in long-term government inflation index bonds at negative 11 basis points. So that's a long way from 4%.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. One thing that struck me in your book is this. You said, my measure of college prestige is 1 minus the US News ranking divided by 100. I was wondering if we could apply that to law schools as well. But now that also strikes me, does that mean that only the top 100 schools even matter?
I'm not sure exactly what I was probably trying to be funny, because there wasn't any serious formula there. But, the US News ranking, I think, is worthless. Our department, for example, my economics department here at Boston University, we're ranked based on publications in top journals, which is a serious ranking that's being done routinely. We're ranked about 11th. If you look at the U.S. News and World Report ranking of graduate departments, our department could easily be ranked 30th or 50th in their ranking, because they have no real methodology. They might ask somebody from Harvard or MIT, or what they think of these. Who knows who they're asking? And well, actually, if they ask people from good schools, they would know our department quite well, because they're always over here giving talks. The university in general has historically been ranked low compared to the quality of the departments, and it's ranked low because it didn't have a great gym, and didn't have great dorms. And a lot of the alumni were pissed off at the administration. It was run by kind of a autocratic guy named John Silver, who pissed off people in the process of making the place a whole lot better. So he pissed off the alumni, so they gave bad ratings. But meanwhile, if you look at classics or physics or economics or any English or the music department, these are like second to none in the country. They're world-renowned departments. But the U.S. News and World, it's not a serious ranking. So I said in the book, if you're going to think about choosing to study chemistry at college, if that's your interest, if you know what your interest is, do your own little ranking of the places you're thinking about, and do it this way. If I'm thinking about, should I choose between, let's say, Wake Forest and Pomona to study chemistry, call somebody from the university, call the chairman at the University of Michigan and ask him or her to rank these two places. Gets a real independent assessment from somebody who actually knows. And maybe he'll say, well, I know these people at this, at Wake Forest, and don't know anybody there. And these people are really good. So right away, you've learned something. If you learn that, if they know nothing about either place, maybe you should be applying to the University of Michigan. So I think that if you're going for an education, if you're going to spend all this money and effort, you want to go to a place that has top researchers, because they're going to know what's at the frontier of their fields. They're going to have to be to get published, you have to be reading the literature, which means you have to be acquainted with what everybody else is doing. You have to be at the forefront of your field because you have to cite other people's work in your papers. So when you're being taught, you want to be taught by somebody who is actually knowledgeable about the frontier of the field, not what was known 50 years ago, right? Why learn old stuff that might actually be wrong at this point, or discounted by people that are really knowledgeable? And we have people at BU, I discussed in the book that some kids come to college, they borrow like $75,000, or they and their parents, like they can't borrow themselves $75,000. I think the limit's around $31,000 for 4 years, but you can have your parents borrow on your behalf, or you could borrow privately. You could end up with a huge amount of borrowing. You could spend 4 years here taking graduate students and visiting professors, of which there are plenty, and never get any of the top faculty on our department in economics, who collectively have been ranked the 10th top or 10th or 11th top department in the world. And if you don't know enough to say, I'm going to be careful about who I select to take courses from, you might as well be going to some place that has no decent economists, no published economists, because you'll get the same kind of you'll get, you won't get cutting edge pedagogy. You won't get taught where things are at the margin, and you'll have to pay for it to boot. And you may pay for the rest of your life. You may be in your 60s still paying off your student loans. And you may borrow so much that you can't actually afford to be, maybe you took economics on the side, but you really studied art history. And again, right there, you took a whole bunch of visitors as opposed to their top art historians. And you wanted to be an art historian, but you borrowed so much money you can't afford to be an art historian. That's the real tragedy here. We have a lot of kids who have no idea how much they're borrowing. They turn around, or their parents are borrowing, and their parents might be handing them the bills and saying, look, I borrowed this money for you. Now you get to repay it. I borrowed so you could go to college. And I didn't want to tell you about how much I was borrowing I don't want you to be nervous about it, but it's your loan. Here it is. You pay it back. I did this for you. Congratulations. And
yeah.
And then the kid says, I can't afford to intern in a art gallery or work in an art museum. They're not paying me enough. I'll be starving to death. Now my entire 4 years of college, which was focused on art history, down the tubes. I borrowed so much I can't afford to do what I wanted to do.
Well, this happens in law school all the time when people, they want, our correspondent here wants to go into big law. So this isn't somebody who is wanting to follow their, passion to help the world. This is somebody who is in it for the money. But we do have, at least half of the people who talk to us want to help people, or they want to help the environment. And then they end up borrowing so much money that there's just no way that they could possibly go ahead and no way that they're going to actually end up doing that also pay off their loans. Hey, we need to cut off this discussion here, but we will continue it on our other podcast, Thinking LSAT, which is a longer form podcast. These episodes over here on LSAT Demon Daily are a little bit shorter. So if it's okay with you, Larry, we'll stop this here and then we'll go over to the other show.
Sure.
The book is called Money Magic. I would really recommend everybody listening to this podcast get a copy of the book. The chapter specifically is called Don't Borrow for College, but there's lots of great advice in the book everywhere. Where can people learn more about you, Larry, if they want to follow up?
Kotlikoff.net is my website. So I write a lot on all kinds of topics, from carbon taxation, banking reform, healthcare reform, but I also work on personal finance. I have a software company that has economics-based personal financial planning advice for households. So I do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I'm just going to spell that for everybody. That's Kotlikoff.net, KOTLIKOFF.net.
Excellent. Email daily at lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.